What was your first drum set?
Well, the first drum set I got was a Ludwig drum set, and I think I remember I got it in January, around the 3rd of January, after spring, as the Christmas break was over, and it was a 20-inch bass drum, 9x13, 16x16 floor tom, and that's sort of what got me started on trying to figure out what drum sounds were about, because at that time everything was calfskin. Plastic hadn't come in yet. It may have been started, but I didn't hear about it until probably 1960-61. And I remember when I got the set, I already had a snare drum, so I knew how to tune the snare drum. And I tuned the tom-tom and held it up, and it had a beautiful sound, the low sound quality and low end. Put it on the bass drum, and it just went absolutely dead. And I thought, what?
So you noticed the problem with the very first drum set?
I noticed the problem right away, and I thought, what happened? Did I lose something here, or what? I took it off. That was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I worked on that drum till about 11 o'clock that night, trying to figure out, why is this drum going totally dead? The other thing I noticed, that your floor tom, the whole sound of the floor tom depended on what surface it sat on. If it was on a wooden floor, it was dead. Cement floor, it was almost unplayable. Not only that, but as you played the drum, if it was on a hard surface, it would actually walk away from you. Sure. Because the legs were vibrating, and it would vibrate across the floor, and you'd have to get it and pull it back. And I spent a lot of time trying to understand it. And I think eventually what helped it is I had to set on a rug, and it stopped doing that, and I just sort of gave up on it. So, but years later, I got much into it when I had the chance to meet and spend time with Shelley Manne, which was probably pivotal. When I was teaching school in Valley Forge area schools, I had a call from the leader of a group in the Air Force band called the Airmen of Note. And I had played in the Westchester jazz band that was very good. A fellow named Bob Curnow had the band when I was in it, and it was an excellent band. Ernie Watts was in the band, had been in the band. Some really good players. And we went to the Villanova Jazz Festival, Notre Dame Jazz Festival. And we won in several categories in there, and I had gotten to know Stan Kenton. And he asked me the last year when I was getting out of college if I would be interested in going on a tour to Europe with the band, and I said, I'm sorry, but I had to take a teaching job. At that time, the Vietnam War was in full swing, and as soon as you got out of school, if you weren't teaching and you didn't have a deferment, you were drafted. Yeah. So I asked him, I said, do you know of any positions that might be open in the service bands? And he said, I don't know of any, but he said, if something comes up, I have been able to get some of my other players in positions when they open up. But he said, if you can find out what might be open, let me know. So he wrote me a letter, and I taught from September till December, and we came back on January break. I had received a call from a fellow named Bob Bunton, who was the chief warrant officer and the leader of the Airmen of Note. And he said, I understand that you wanted an audition to get in the band. And I said, I did, but I had heard that everything was filled up. He said, well, a drum position is opening. You got to come down if you want it and audition for it. I went down, auditioned, and they took me in. And he said, you've got to get in now, go through basic training, because we're doing a tour out to California, and we're doing some concerts with Shelley Manne. Okay. So as soon as we got out, I went down to Washington, D.C., rehearsed with the band for about 2 weeks, and we went on the tour and went out to L.A., and then we did these concerts with Shelley. And the interesting thing about it was I had a chance to talk to him. He was using a set of Leedy drums, all calfskin heads, small 20-inch bass drum. I think it might have been an 18. And I remember watching him set them up, and he was tapping them, and I walked over to him and I said, you use all calf heads? He said, yeah, I just haven't found anything that compares to calfskin. I really like the sound of it. And he said, the only problem is you don't always hear all the sound you want to get out of the drum. And he lifted the bass drum and hit it, and then set it back down, and then hit it. And he said, you see, I'm losing a lot of sound. And I said, okay. I said, what about the toms? He said, well, they're not much different because there's all hardware on there. And I said, so we started talking a little bit. He said, how long are you here for? I said, we're here recording all week. We'll be here. We're leaving on Saturday. And I think this was like a Monday or something. He says, why don't you come on down to the Manhole? And he said, I'll be there.
Which was his club, right?
His club. The Manhole, Shelley's Manhole was the place to go for jazz in the late 50s and the 60s. I forget when it closed, probably sometime in the mid 70s or early 70s. And I went down there the next night, and he was there, and we probably spent about 3 hours just talking about drummers and drums. And he said, you know, I'm trying to get these things sounding better. We were talking about down there. He said, I really like calfskin, but he said, you know, you work with what you got, but I'm trying to get all this, as much hardware. If you noticed, I don't have pearl covering on any of my drums. I don't need that. He said, I care about the sound. I'm not that knocked out with the looks. I don't care, because he said, I do so much studio work, you know, and of course you can't see a drum on a on a record. So I started thinking about that. Then when I started doing a lot of recording and jingles and things like that, I remember it started to become such an incredible difference between the drum on a holder and off the holder that it was like, man, somebody's got to do something about this.